Back when we moved into our house, we were introduced to all of our neighbors by them coming over with cookies or brownies like they do in movies. This was a nice, quiet, middle-class neighborhood made up of mostly older white people and new families. I mention that because we were the only black family in the neighborhood. No black wives, husbands, not even adopted children. We didn't find it strange though. It was just very clear that we were different. I was about 13 at the time, and my brother was 15. Our backyard is half an acre and is fenced, but it's connected to two other houses' backyards. Each one is half the size of ours, but we all have separating fences. So to picture it, there's a T-shaped fence separating our backyards. The house to the left was the home of an older white man named Tom. He reminded me of Willie Nelson without the cool pigtails. He liked to be outside shirtless, usually with a denim vest, no matter the weather. He was a well-built man, but visibly kind of frail. We actually found him funny, in a creepy old guy type of way. As I got older, he started to make comments. I played in the backyard with my two dogs a lot, and Tom could see me from his living room window that faced his backyard. Whenever I glanced over, I could see him in the window, just standing there, watching me. When he noticed that I saw him, he'd come outside and talk to me. I tried to get away before he could come out, but sometimes I was too slow. I didn't want to make it too obvious, so I would just walk. But if I didn't make it inside, he'd yell for me to come back. I never got too close to the fence. I'd speak from a distance. He'd ask me about school, what grade I was in, tell me I was pretty, ask if I was old enough to have a boyfriend, and if I had an older sister or older friends that looked like me. I'd laugh it off, but after a few questions, he'd stop talking and just stare at me, silently. I'd always give an excuse about needing to go inside. He'd nod and stand at the fence and watch me walk back into the house. This happened almost weekly. My mom loves to decorate, so she changes the house decor every few months. Pretty annoying, actually. In one of her designing sprees, she decided to get a new sliding glass door for the back porch, which required her to take the curtains down in the living room. It took forever to get them installed, but she figured there was no point in putting the curtains back up if we take them down again. Fine. Our family TV was in the living room. I didn't have a TV in my room, so I'd oftentimes watch TV late in the night in the living room with my brother. One night, my brother went to bed early, so I decided to watch TV by myself. Around midnight or so, I turned the TV off to go to bed. I got up from the couch, turned off the light, and turned around to see another light on. Not in my house, but in Tom's house, in his living room. And there he was, standing in the window, watching me. I told my parents about it later. They shrugged it off. As my name suggests, I'm an anxious soul, so I oftentimes chalk things up to my anxiety. Fine. Soon after, my dogs started getting sick. I'd take them out to play, and they'd start throwing up or having diarrhea. We knew it wasn't their food because we hadn't given them anything new. We threw away the dog treats we'd recently bought just in case that was the problem, but it didn't stop. I noticed though that every time I let them out alone, they'd run straight over to Tom's fence, jumping up and down, wagging their tails. He'd slowly walk outside, reach over the fence, and feed them his treats, which was odd because Tom didn't have a dog. I told my parents, and my dad went to talk to him, telling him the dogs were getting sick. He apologized, stopped feeding them, and they got better. A few weeks later, I was coming home from school. My brother was in the grade above me, and I was a senior, so he was in college at the time. When I got home, no one else would be home for a few more hours. I had a routine: put my bag upstairs, change clothes, let the dogs out of their cages on the porch, get a snack, and then let them back in. For some reason, I was unusually excited to see my dogs that day, so instead of going upstairs, I went straight to the back porch. I got to the door to open it, and I saw Tom sitting on the ground in front of my dog's cages. I froze. He didn't see me. I looked over to see if the door was locked. It wasn't. I locked it as slowly as possible so it didn't make a noise. It did. He looked over and saw me standing there. I ran upstairs and called my parents. My mom's a nurse, so she didn't have her phone on, and my dad just never answered the phone. I didn't think it was serious enough to call the police, so I just hid. After a moment, I heard him knock on the door. It wasn't loud or aggressive though. It was almost friendly, like he just wanted to talk. I tried my dad's phone again. He answered. I was crying, telling him Tom was on the porch. He said he'd head home, but he was over an hour away. I just sat in my room, waiting for my dad. The knocking stopped. My dad got home and Tom was gone. I don't know what happened between Tom and my dad, but he stopped coming outside and talking to me. He never stopped watching though, always standing in his living room. Sometimes I'd see him through the window and he'd wave at me, but always with the light on, just so I knew he was still there.
For a bit of context, I grew up in the middle of a farmland in a large 1800s Victorian home. Given its history, there's always been several shacks and barns that once belonged to the builder of this house. There's a highway that sees maybe 3 cars on it during the night, and directly across from said highway, about 200 feet inward of a cornfield, is a shack that I have always found creepy. As kids, myself and friends would dare each other to go inside and look, which always ended up with us going in as a team. Nothing scary was ever found. Maybe a few broken glasses, metal piles, and miscellaneous items. There was no electricity or any sort of utility that made it homely. Years go by and the existence of the shack becomes a part of my daily life. However, one particular night, as I was watching TV, I noticed the light going off and on outside of my window. After getting startled, I dismissed it as just passing cars, simply more frequent than they typically are. An hour passes and it's nearly midnight and the light stays on. This time I know for sure it's coming from outside. My family was asleep, but being my pansy 16-year-old self, I needed confirmation. Too bad for me, no one was going to check it out. So I go alone. I grabbed my pocket knife and a flashlight, the best I could think of with my shaken thoughts, and take off into the night. As I near the highway, the lights turn off, almost making me choke on air, but I had to figure out what the hell was going on. I make it to the entrance of the shack, which has no door, and slowly begin to enter. My flashlight scanning the room for any sort of life. What happens next? I'll never forget. 5 feet away from me, there's an old tattered recliner, facing away, that my father had tossed in there for future disposal. I shine my light on it, because I knew I'd seen it rock ever so slightly. As I did that, a man stands up from the recliner, saying absolutely nothing. All I could tell was that he was middle-aged and wearing a jacket of sorts. Before I could process what was happening, I was already sprinting across the road and praying he wasn't behind me. It felt like years before I could make it to my door, but as I am about to make it into safety, I decide to look back. He was standing in the road completely still. No words whatsoever. It's been 7 years since then. The shack still stands and the recliner remains in place. My dad never believed me. I wish someone would share the dread I had when I realized that recliner was facing a window, which was directed straight at my house. Let's not meet again. Thanks.
I am a 28-year-old female, and I have lived in the same apartment for 4 years. My neighbors in the unit above me are a couple in their 30s who have lived there for about 3 years, with no issues between us. During the past 6 months, I've noticed some changes in their behavior. At first, it was just a few days per week. I'd hear music with heavy bass, accompanied by rhythmic jumping. I assumed they bought an exercise bike or something, but sometimes the jumping gets so intense that it shakes my overhead light fixtures. The jumping routine has been escalating to the point that it takes place every day, normally between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. I also noticed that they called 1-800-JUNK and got rid of a lot of nice possessions. However, I figured none of this was my business, so I kept my observations to myself. About 3 weeks ago, everything escalated. Multiple times per week, it sounds like they're hosting a mini Burning Man event in their apartment. The music is so loud and clear that it sounds as if I'm at a concert while sitting in my living room. There's clearly a lot of people involved because the jumping and stomping shakes multiple light fixtures and cabinets. The music is a mix of new age spiritual vibes, dance beats, and a male voiceover giving weird instructions like, rebrand yourself, surrender yourself, with stomps in response. I've taken audio recordings on my phone and one video from the hallway during these events. I still didn't complain to the building, but I wanted evidence in case it became a regular thing. This week, I've encountered a big problem. The couple above me has a private patio, which is directly above my bedroom. I came home from a 3-day trip out of town yesterday, and my ceiling is legitimately collapsing in one corner. Big chunks of plaster had fallen to the ground, and I saw a little water. I immediately called my superintendent since I don't want to be buried alive by ceiling rubble if it gives out. When he came to check it out, he was shocked and pissed. He said that the woman in the couple appears to be working with some people, doing workshops or something. He can see their patio from his apartment window and has watched the group do these dancing, jumping, dirt rituals out there on a weekly basis. He said they all dance and jump to the music, then spread dirt, along with something else, across the patio. He believes that the dirt and unknown substance combo is getting through the wood cracks, absorbing water, and weighing down my ceiling. To fix the problem, my super said he had to go talk to the woman, check out their patio, and ultimately hire a contractor to pull up the wood to scrape out whatever the hell is causing my ceiling to fall. I could hear them talking from my room, and the woman sounded distraught and defensive. When my super left, he called me and warned me that she might try to come down to my apartment and demand to see the damage, but don't let her in. This was a little concerning to me. Is she a threat? The damage is real, and I wouldn't mind showing her. She started playing her music again, relatively loud, kind of like a warning shot. I mentioned the music and jumping to my super and said I had audio recordings. He started begging me to send the evidence to the front office. It sounds like he wants them evicted. I said, okay, sure. I hate to be a rat, but if I have to choose sides, I'll side with the building that dictates my annual rent price. He called me twice more that afternoon to confirm that I shared my evidence, and I said yes. Shortly after everything went down, I left my apartment to run an errand. The woman was outside, just standing on the sidewalk, and stared at me the whole time as I walked by. I ignored her. Now today, I went to run another quick errand in the neighborhood. When I returned, the couple was again standing on the sidewalk, both of them. They followed me into the building, then waited until I opened my apartment door to confront me. They were both wearing creepy fake smiles and started interrogating me. They asked, "Is your ceiling really collapsing? When did it start? Do you think it was related to the recent rainfall? Because our patio is just fine." I was a little uncomfortable. Were they waiting for me outside? How did they know I even left the building? Why were they both standing there? I've literally never seen them enter together in their 3 years of living here. But I have nothing to hide, so I confirmed that the damage is pretty bad. I just don't want it to fall during the winter. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but hopefully the work will be done pretty quickly for everyone's sake. They seemed satisfied enough, so I said have a good day and shut my door. I'm getting the sense that they're nervous about what the contractors will find when they tear open their patio. What the fuck is up with dirt rituals? Who are these people she's working with? I don't know what they look like or why they're available to stomp around on the weekdays. The repair work has started on both sides, but the contractors will come on Wednesday for the grand reveal of what's under the patio that's making my ceiling collapse. In the meantime, I feel like I need to be alert and keep my eyes out for these people as well as the couple. It's unusual for me to see them in general, especially twice in 2 days. They seemed scared and in denial of the problem. They also literally ambushed me. Hopefully it's over soon. Update: the contractors came today and they reported that there was in fact dirt and sludge visible below the neighbor's patio. However, thanks to the help of my internet sleuthing friend, I've gained a lot more insight into the realm that dwells above me. As one Redditor suggested, my neighbor is affiliated with multiple ecstatic dance communities, both international and local. The international group has planned events during which all cells of the organization host dance sessions simultaneously. It also has a YouTube channel that streams psytrance music 24/7. I listened to a portion of it and a female voiceover declared, "You are becoming the Game Master." Meanwhile, the local groups seem to be more exclusive and more radical in their mindset. One of the local groups conducts 3-day events that costs upwards of $400 for admission. Participating in all 3 days is mandatory, and the event description mentions that it begins with a ritual. The last affiliation that I've confirmed via social media footprints is that my neighbor and a few members of the local communities are also involved with some compassionate death groups. There's no way for me to verify at this time if these affiliations overlap in a meaningful way, so I will simply state the facts that I have evidence to prove. My super asked me about the jumping again when I saw him today. He agreed with my new game plan to wait for another large event to happen and then call him to check on my dishwasher so he can intervene. So for now, the ways in which the puzzle pieces of ecstatic dance, compassionate death, patio dirt rituals, and ceiling collapse connect will remain a mystery.
About 12 years ago, my boyfriend at the time and I ended up finding a cheap, quiet hotel to rent for practically free. Of course, we had to maintain the 3 properties there and help our landlord out with his meals or just drive him out to eat, where you were also treated for taking him out. The studio that we were moving into needed a decent amount of renovations to be comfortable and livable. It was pretty quiet and isolated on top of that hill. Beside our studio, there was a neighbor across our driveway, about 150 feet away, plus our landlord, who owned all 3 homes, located about 3/4 of a football field to the right of our studio. The landlord's girlfriend lived in an apartment above the landlord's garage. The landlord was extremely cool, so we got free cable, water, and power. We only had to pay for propane for heat and hot water. The bill was to be split with our neighbor across the driveway from us since we shared the large propane tank. We didn't officially meet our neighbor until a few weeks after moving in. We had introduced ourselves and had a normal conversation. I got a chance to really talk with her, however, a couple weeks after our initial meeting. We stood around outside talking for almost an hour. When my renovations got brought up, I wanted to show her our great work. So, we headed inside my place for a small tour. It was a studio, as mentioned, so you pretty much get the whole house tour just stepping in the front door. That's where the weirdness truly began, though. The actual first words she spoke upon stepping through the front door were, "Is that a used mattress?" while pointing out our bed. Now, if you know me, then you know that when it comes to my beds, I keep them really clean. I mean, like, straight up using a waterproof mattress cover to keep my mattresses pristine with no stains and white still, and only use good clean sheets and blankets. So her question really threw me as I stared at our bright white clean mattress edge that was exposed as a result of me making the bed earlier that morning. All I could manage to say was, "No, I got it brand new." We all had our varying work schedules, so I really didn't see her for another few weeks after that. But then, the landlord's girlfriend pulls me aside one day with something pretty interesting to say. She tells me that the neighbor had been telling her and the landlord that my boyfriend and I were known to have burgled houses. I was blown away. I wondered why she would say that. Neither my boyfriend nor I had even known anyone capable of that, let alone us being capable of that. The neighbor's daughter turned out to be a new cop, and she still worked in the jail for her first year. Supposedly, That's how the neighbor knew what she didn't even know. All I could really say to the landlord and his girlfriend was the obvious fact that we weren't even capable and couldn't even prove it, but we had clean criminal records. So we just dismissed it for the time being. After that, we started noticing dirty looks from her here and there. So naturally, it was pretty awkward when I had to go over and knock on her door to collect half of her propane bill. She gave me a check, and when I read her name aloud and looked into her eyes, I remembered who she was. When I was 16, so about 12 years or so before moving in next door to her, I ended up at her house with my high school boyfriend for Thanksgiving. My boyfriend at the time's parents were friends with her and her husband, and they had a daughter who was our age also at the time. My boyfriend and I hung out with the daughter while the adults hung out and got drunk as they prepared dinner. I barely remember even interacting with any of the adults, except for, of course, at dinner. Yet, after that evening, I was told by my boyfriend from his parents that I was no longer welcome back at his parents' friend's house. Neither my boyfriend nor I could possibly think of why. I found out a couple months later why, though. Let's just say that I hit puberty pretty early and wasn't exactly flat-chested, unfortunately. That got me plenty of unwanted attention from guys, even older ones. My boyfriend's dad at the time enjoyed staring at my chest and was pretty open about it. So no surprise that on Thanksgiving that night, as both men were pretty buzzed on their beers, they noticed my chest. Obviously, word got back to the women and they weren't happy. Add that to the fact that shortly before I moved in next door to her years later, her husband had divorced her and she was quite bitter about it. I laughed at first upon reading the name on the check and asked her if she was of the same last name that I had known in high school. She gave me a sideways smile and told me that she indeed remembered exactly who I was. That, combined with the fact that the landlord's girlfriend had told me that I was the only tenant that she had ever had a problem with, and told me that the worst was yet to come. It was just small things at first that we started to notice. Like, when I'd gotten home, I'd always hit the lock button on our key fob to lock my car, which would make the horn honk once to confirm it was locked. Every single time I would do that though, she'd always have to hit her key fob from inside her own house to make her car honk as well. Then the landlord informed us that she requested that my boyfriend and I stay completely off our property and to not ever knock on her door. But then right after, she turned around and had our landlord ask if we could go into her house while she was gone to set up a treadmill for her. She just left her front door unlocked for us to do it. One day, we had a friend stop by for a visit. He had a really weird look on his face as he came up our walkway though, so naturally, my boyfriend and I looked at each other and then asked him, why the face? Well, he said as he sat down on our porch, your neighbor, some woman, took a picture of my license plate as soon as I parked. Then she wanted to know if I was going to be spending the night here. In shock and bewilderment, we asked him what she looked like just to make sure that it was her, and yep, it surely was. She even took pictures of our license plates after that. She started to get real petty after that. She started trying to keep track of whenever one of us would even step over the line to her half of the driveway. If she felt that one of us drove up the driveway in front of her house too fast, she would scream at whoever it was. That got me up in her face yelling at her one time. She even threatened to sue us once because, according to her, one of our cats was on her car and scratched her new car's paint when she scared it off of her car. I used a squirt bottle when I noticed the same cat on my similar dark-colored new car one day, and there was no scratches on it like she said. I mean, you could see the clear coat where the cat's nails were, but it rubbed right off just by using my finger. I started to worry about my 3 cats with her around, especially after one of my nosy, ditzier cats wandered into her house after she left the front door open for a while. Whenever that cat would wander towards her house after that, I'd call him back if I happened to see him doing it. That cat disappeared shortly thereafter. My boyfriend and I smelled something dead around the property a couple months later after searching tirelessly for him, but we could never locate the source of the smell. Tensions between the three of us and even the poor landlord and his girlfriend were pretty high at that point. But it got worse one afternoon when I happened to catch her on our property. I was around the backside of the house talking to my boyfriend, but when I went to walk around to our front door, I caught her. She was crossing back over the driveway towards her own house with this stupid, childlike, guilty look on her face. Believe it or not, it actually took us a couple minutes for it to dawn on me that she had been sneaking around to the side of our house to eavesdrop on us. Come to think of it, that's about the time I started to hear strange noises outside our windows at night. Our mail situation was a bit strange at that place because there was only one mailbox for our address, which the three houses on that property shared. There was only one key to the mailbox, which the landlord had. The landlord and his girlfriend didn't drive anymore, so usually my neighbor lady would get the mail from the box for everyone and drop it off over at the landlord's house so we could go and get it from him. So one fine day, I trotted over to the landlord's to see if my check had come in the mail. He said it hadn't come, and he could just tell by looking at the mail pile it wasn't there. It was a state check, so it looked kind of obvious amongst regular mail. On the way out of my landlord's house, she was coming up the stairs on her way back in. So I asked her if she happened to see it and thought maybe that's why she was heading back to the landlord's house, maybe because she forgot to give it to him. But boy, did she explode on me. She started yelling at me and said that she had no idea what I was even talking about. I didn't understand her reaction at all until a couple months later. I had started noticing that I wasn't receiving certain important things that I was expecting in the mail, like my new driver's license or vehicle tags for registration and some pretty important Social Security paperwork. So I hatched a plan and informed the landlord first. The second person I clued in was our mailman, since it was a locked mailbox. Since there was only one key to said mailbox, my theory should have been easy to prove. And it was. My plan was to address an envelope as if it were important and coming in the mail for me. I only planned to give it to the mailman at our mailbox, so it would be missing the postmark, but I hoped she'd overlook that small detail. After the mailman deposited it into our mailbox, I just had to wait for her to bring the mail to the landlord and see if she left it in with the rest of the mail like she was supposed to. And sure enough, when I went to go to the landlord's to pick up our mail, it wasn't there. Excited to finally be able to make her face some consequences for her crappy actions, I immediately called the postmaster to report the mail theft. But unfortunately, being in the beginning of a recession back then, the post offices were far too understaffed to even explore the case. I even tried to call the sheriff, but mail theft is federal territory. I started to notice that the noises outside my windows at night were happening more frequently. Not only that, but I started waking up during the night with several stomach pains and diarrhea that would usually be gone by morning. That would happen at least twice a month while living there. Then, one day, as I went out into my front yard to talk on my cell phone, there was zero service inside the house. The neighbor lady suddenly appeared on her front porch to face me while holding her cell phone out towards me. I couldn't figure out if she was just like eavesdropping on my phone calls somehow or maybe filming me. But after that, she would do it every time she was home and I went out to make a phone call. On top of that, it got even worse when Miss worries about everyone else's company being legit recommended some lady's friend of hers daughter and her boyfriend move into the landlord's above garage apartment. Apparently, the landlord's girlfriend had suddenly moved out, leaving the apartment vacant. Now, you would think that a nosy neighbor like that monitoring our guests would choose nice and safe people to live in our property with us, right? Wrong. The young couple definitely wreaked havoc, I'll tell you. At first, they got to the landlord's house while we were all out at dinner one night. They stole what they assumed to be the landlord's cell phone from his living room, but it was actually my recently deceased mother's phone that I had lent to him since the cell phone had about a year left on the contract agreement. Also, some of the last pictures of my mother and I were on that cell phone. I didn't actually find out the phone was stolen until my boyfriend told me as soon as our landlord told him. I remember that I was out in my field doing some tracking for a peeping Tom. Whole other story. When he came out to tell me, I immediately yanked my phone out of my pocket and called the stolen phone. A younger sounding girl answered but hung up immediately after me asking, "Who is this?" We both left my other house right away and headed over to our studio so I could confront the young couple at the apartment. My boyfriend and I quietly crept up the stairs in the garage that led up to their apartment. As I stood quietly outside the apartment door, I texted the phone that I thought they had stolen. I did that because that particular brand of phone had a certain text tone, exclusively to that type of phone only, and I knew my mom had that phone set to that text tone. Sure enough, I heard it go off inside their apartment, so I calmly knocked on the door and waited for them to answer. When the young girl answered the door, I calmly asked her about the phone. Before she could answer me though, I explained to her that the phone she had stolen was my mother's and she had recently died. I also explained that the phone had quite a few last photos of my mother and I in it. Of course, she denied even having the phone. For all of you reading this, I just have to say that I tried, people. I tried. But I kind of lost it right then. I yelled at her, "Bullshit. I just texted it before I knocked and heard that fucking text phone that phone has go off in your apartment." My boyfriend, who was standing behind me the whole time, tried to pull me back, as it was the landlord's house after all. As that was going on, her boyfriend happened to walk into the living room area behind her, but as soon as he saw and heard me, he took right off. She kept denying it, and I kept getting angrier and angrier whilst yelling louder and louder. Eventually, my boyfriend had to step in and basically pull me back down the stairs. Next, I called the cops, since I had proof via the phone's location on a family share map proving where it was, and also my online account had all their phone activity recorded on it. The cops even sneaked up the stairs to listen for my phone while I texted and called it. As I found out from the officers that night, the couple were both searchable, since one being on parole and the other on felony probation. Although they ended up searching for over an hour and a half in the small apartment, they didn't get my phone back. I even told her that if she just emailed me the pics from my phone of my mom and I, that she could just keep the phone. I wouldn't call the cops or do anything else to them, but no, I ended up with neither. The young couple didn't stop there though. Thanks, neighbor lady, all taking pictures of my guest's license plate for security and you saying that we were all at risk. For their next performance, the young couple again broke into the landlord's house, but stole his car keys and car that time. As you know, our landlord couldn't even drive himself, so that was the vehicle that we used to take him out in and around. The landlord's car was gone for 4 days or so, and the cops eventually found it ditched in a nearby canyon. Since the landlord couldn't receive the call to inform him of the discovery of his car, they had to take it to the impound to store it, costing him almost $3,000. After all that crap, I still had to live there part-time since my mom's house that I had inherited had no kitchen due to renovations. During that time, the neighbor, for some stupid reason, let her huge German Shepherd out of its fenced area as soon as my 4-year-old son exited my car there. It was a new dog to her, so I was appalled when it ran up toward my son barking and growling. How would she know how the dog would react around strangers, let alone kids? Thankfully, I moved into my other house as soon as the renovations were done. After I moved out of that place and got away from her, my intermittent diarrhea stopped completely. The landlord even told me that she had calmed way down after I left, even though my boyfriend still lived there. Nice peaceful ending, right? Well, not the hell as far as I was concerned it wasn't, because one night, I got a wild hair for some pretty revenge. You see, there was a gate about halfway at that long, winding driveway. I had noticed that There was also a chain on the pole that the gate would close to, and that gave me an idea. I took an old combination lock that I had around the house and straight up locked her ass in the yard with the gate and chain. Since the landlord couldn't drive himself out and I had already taken him into town to get what he needed earlier that day, I knew that he'd be fine and well enough. Plus, I knew he'd laugh his ass off when he heard of my little misdeed. I didn't get to see her stupid face when she realized that she couldn't leave for work that next morning, but I'll bet it was a classic. From what I heard a little later, she reversed her car back up the winding driveway to fume to the landlord after she had realized that she was locked in. He said it was hilarious, by the way. Even more hilarious was the fact that it took her like 4 hours to get someone up there to cut the lock off so she could finally go to work. Thankfully, my life went back to normal after I moved out. The only thing that any of us could come up with was that she must have been jealous of me after the things her husband had said about my body back when I was 16. Either way, that was definitely an experience.
Four years ago, my apartment complex decided they wanted to renovate my unit, so I had to move out at the end of my lease. I live in Denver, and rent is pretty ridiculous here, so I started worrying about finding something affordable in my neighborhood, which I love. I posted on the Nextdoor app to see if anyone in my neighborhood knew of any affordable rentals in the area. I immediately got a message from someone named Joe, who said that one of the condos in his complex was going to be up for rent soon, and he knew the owner. He offered to get me in touch with the owner. I asked if he could send me pictures of the unit, and he asked if he could text me some pictures his neighbor took because the chat function on the app is really slow. I now feel stupid for doing this, but I gave him my phone number. I kid you not, I received a phone call from an unknown number within seconds. I normally don't answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from a number that wasn't saved in my phone, so I answered it. I was completely bewildered when the person said, "Hi, it's Joe. How's your day going?" It took me by surprise. I didn't know what to say. He started to shoot the shit on the phone, talking about how he works nights and how tired he is, and how he takes care of his daughter while his girlfriend works during the day. I finally interrupted and said, "So, about the condo." He pretty much disregarded that and said, "I don't think my girlfriend would appreciate me talking to you, but I don't have to tell her, right?" I said I have to go and immediately hung up the phone. As soon as I did, he started texting me. It was really bizarre and alarming to me. I blocked his number, and moments later he found me on Facebook and sent me a friend request. I'm 32 years old, but it was so disturbing to me that I actually called my parents to tell them about it and how unnerved it made me. And the worst part was that on Nextdoor, even if your exact address isn't listed, your complex is. I was pretty certain that I didn't have my address visible on my profile, but I checked, and sure enough, my address and unit number were public. Unable to contact me any other way, he started messaging me again on Nextdoor, asking if I wanted to go on a walk with him. You can't block or report people on the app, so I deleted it. One night, a month or so later, I had a knock on my door around 10 p.m. on a weeknight. I looked out my peephole, but couldn't get a good enough look at the person. He had his head down slightly. Either way, I don't answer the door for anyone I'm not expecting, especially not a random guy at 10 p.m. at night. Feeling panicked, I called my neighbor across the hall. She's an older woman, and we look out for each other since we both live alone. I asked her if it looked like a delivery guy at the wrong door. She opened her door to get a look at the guy, and that spooked him because he literally ran away. I have no idea if this was the Nextdoor guy or not, but my gut tells me it was. This was a big wake-up call. I always felt like I practiced good online safety, but I didn't even know my address was visible on Nextdoor. I'll never be that casual or lazy about privacy settings like that again.